All right, today my topic is poverty and economic justice. My name is Richard Hastings, and we're going to start with the background history of poverty in America. So, to start, we're going to define a just society, which is a society that not only ensures the basic human needs are met, but also invests in the social well being of all its members, especially those who aren't able to provide for themselves. A just society ensures basic human needs and invests in the social well being of all its members. So, as a social worker, we advocate for the most vulnerable populations, which includes a large focus on children, single parents, older adults, individual families, and communities in economic distress. Social work Social work focus must be on promoting just policies that build universal systems of support and promote financial security and provide an adequate safety, quote unquote, safety net for those in need. So, Americans living in poverty, the Census Bureau estimates that about 36.5 million people in America live in poverty, and back in 2002. 15.4 million of the poor population live in severe poverty, and severe poverty is defined as an annual income below 50% of the poverty threshold. American America has a tendency of giving more to the rich and creating a declining wage, rising debt, and risking the deep and persistent of poverty for many. The top 1% of wealthy families receive 17% of all income and more than 42% of new assets back in 2004. And assets are also very important to gain wealth, and they own 42% of that. And approximately one-fourth of the U.S. labor force works at the poverty level. So, back in 1964, Molly Orshansky developed a formula for calculating the poverty threshold, and it did not include geography or living expenses or non-cash benefits, for example, food stamps. The Census Bureau today updates the threshold annually and adjusts for inflation, but her method and her basic formula is still unchanged and still being used today. Parents who left welfare found low-wage jobs, and annual wages left them at the poverty level income. So with that brings us into the issue statements, social workers, and the disparities in wealth. So joblessness, economic insecurity contribute to increase of mental illness, family violence, suicide, substance abuse, crime, and diminish capacity for healthy families and community functioning. Social workers have to learn knowledge and experiences that give them the special responsibility to advocate for income, employment, and social support policies that push for economic justice. And it should be noted that there is a vast difference between the economic status of black families and white families when looking at the median and average financial wealth. And just these two statistics show it right there. In 2004, when a black person would make 300 versus 36,000 for a medium wealth family, for a white family, or the average wealth, which was 61,500 for a black family, and then 402,500 for a white family. So there's clearly a problem there. And then rising debt and kind of the poor. Americans have a tendency of taking a large amount of debt to make ends meet. Household debt in the United States has consistently trended upwards, and over 130% of disposable personal income. Many different reasons contribute to the 14% of middle class family debt services obligations that exceed 40% of their income. Some of those reasons include The deregulation of credit card interest, fees, and aggressive marketing tactics have exposed low and middle income consumers to predatory lending practices, which jeopardize their economic future and increasingly lead to bankruptcy. And then children under 18 represent 25% of the population, which makes up, but it makes up 35.2% of the people in poverty. Geographic isolation and concentration of urban poor populations are key determinants of the complexity distance of the poverty in the United States, and that was made pretty clear during Hurricane Katrina, which exposed this in the quote unquote, which has been called the new urban poverty. Wages, tax credits, cash assistance, and other benefits such as food stamps, Medicare, and subsides for children, excuse me, child transportation lead to a success in transit to work for many families. Many families still face barriers due to lack of skill or education, or they might be suffering with disabling medical, physical, or emotional conditions. And so, going into the last part of the issue statement, which would be employment measures, employment and unemployment measures need to be analyzed to have a clear understanding of what is being measured. In 2007, 7.2 million people were unemployed, and an additional 1.3 people were marginally attached, typo, but attached to the labor force without jobs. Marginally attached to the labor force, and this means without jobs but interest in working. And then another subgroup of that are discouraged workers, and that is those who want a job but are without hope of finding work. And discouraged workers make up 276,000 of the 1.3 million, which is a pretty large portion of it. It's almost a fourth of it. Marginally attached to the labor force, and the highest rate of unemployment was reported back in 2007 in September, 60% for teens, and this number did not even include discouraged and marginally attacked workers. So there's a lot of issues there. And then that brings us to the policy statement. Come on, go Scar. So the NASW, which is National Association of Social Work, supports a notion of economic policy that invests in the human, quote unquote, human capital, and recognizes that a national well-being derives not only from an economic balance sheet, but also from the well-being of its members. So specifically, NASW, supports broad social, economic, and political actions to end poverty and the vast inequalities in wealth and income. Economic policy that includes the elimination of poverty and race-based barriers is very important to opportunity, reducing the dynamic of individuals and intergroup competition, and thus reducing economic sources of discrimination by race, gender, age, or other factors. The proposal to improve economic programs for low-wage workers, women, children, people of color, people living in poverty, and people with disabilities. Economic policies that either avoid recession or inflation or mitigate their impact. A federal minimum wage index to cost of living increase and is a living wage. Fair labor practices for all workers, including children, youth, and those in public employment programs. Equity and enforcement of equal opportunity and affirmative action legislation. Policies that support compensation for individuals engaged in the care of dependent family members. Unstigmatized family support at a level that enables those who are unable to work to live in dignity. And finally, federal programs that invest in education and particularly retraining. Federal programs that invest in education and retraining, particularly addressing the needs for competence in the global economy, especially for low-income workers, displaced workers, current public assistance recipients. Excuse me. Such programs should include financial support and tuition subsides and opportunities to obtain higher education available to those who can benefit from it without regard to ability to pay. And then some of the other things that made it, but I didn't quite touch on, were like quality, accessibility, and affordability, and affordable childcare for those working outside the home, or expanded efforts by the United States at the international economic cooperation and the development of compensation internationally industrial policies, including trade agreements that protect the environment, ensure the right to organize and bargain collectively, and provide a living wage. So, in conclusion, some of the areas that we touched on where there's been an issue in America regarding poverty and economic justice, and social workers must advocate for those in need with the focus on children, single parents, older adults, and individual families and communities in economic distress who struggle. Americans have a tendency of taking a large amount of debt to make ends meet, and many families still face barriers due to lack of skill and education. The highest rate of unemployment was reported back in 2007, and that number didn't even include discouraged, marginally attached workers. And NASW supports a national economic policy that invests human capital and recognizes that a national well-being derives not only from an economic balance sheet, but also from a well-being of all its members. Thank you for your time.